We have revealed our top 10 positional rankings, but now it's time to pick the top guy we are targeting at each position for 2025 fantasy drafts on today's episode of Locked On Fantasy Football.
You are Locked On Fantasy, your daily NFL fantasy podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into the Locked On Fantasy Football Podcast. I'm one of your co-hosts, Michelle Magdziuk, and when I'm not doing this, I'm a researcher and fantasy analyst with NFL Network.
And I'm your other co-host, Vinnie Iyer. When I'm not doing this, I'm writing about NFL fantasy and betting for sportingnews.com.
Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just head over to FanDuel.com today to get started. We have gone through our top 10 consensus rankings for each position throughout this week. Monday, we hit on running backs. Tuesday, we hit on wide receivers. Wednesday was quarterbacks. And yesterday on Thursday's show was tight end. So if you missed any of those episodes, go ahead and go listen to those after today's show. But today, we're going to reveal who among those group in our top 10 at each position that we're really targeting when it comes to 2025 fantasy drafts. And of course, we're going to have in their cost, right? How costly they are to how good we think they can be. So let's start with quarterback here, Vinny. Who is the guy in our top 10 that you'll be targeting most come drafts this year?
Yeah, we talked about him quite a bit, and he was a bit of a surprise that we both kind of put him there in the top 10, right in the middle, is Justin Herbert. I just like the trajectory of this Chargers offense from what we saw. I mean, it was a big transitional year, new scheme with the Greg Roman coming in and Jim Harbaugh's concepts and losing his receivers, Keenan Allen and Mike Williams. So figuring it out with some new guys, Ladd McConkey and Justin Herbert really started to get going there down the stretch. And Herbert put up the numbers that we're looking for in fantasy. Now, they start out run heavy, and I think they had to figure out some things in the passing game once J.K. Dobbins was not available and open things up there. So it was just a matter of time before Herbert got comfortable, and they would open it up and throw downfield a little bit more. And they were just adjusting to their weapons. I think the weapons will be upgraded here. I think they'll look for an impact tight end. They'll look for another receiver here that they can trust on the outside. I think they're going to be aggressive about getting some big play guys, be able to stretch the field as well as improve their intermediate passing game with McConkey. So I really like what the Chargers are doing. I think they'll have a second very good offseason. Look, they've only had Harbaugh and Roman for 1 year. At least you get some continuity with Herbert going into year two. So I'm excited about what he can do. The talent, we know physically, it's off the charts, and we've also seen it before with his high production.
Yeah, I really like Justin Herbert come this year, and I think he could be a really nice value just because of like how many seasons it's been since he put together a full great season, right? But second half of that season, he really started to come along in this new system with his new weapons, and really it was just Ladd McConkey that was consistent. The rest, I mean, he didn't really have a tight end. Quentin Johnston came up with some big plays, that really just because of Herbert's great passing ability, but get him more weapons and allow him to throw like they did in the second half of the season. And yeah, I really like Herbert this year. But the guy I'm going to target most, he's going to be going much later than Justin Herbert. It's Caleb Williams. And I all of a sudden, I'm all in on Caleb Williams. I think this is going to be my go-to guy that I'm targeting because he's going to go much later than he should be going. And it was not a great fantasy rookie season, right? That's for sure. He was only averaging 14 points per game over the whole season. However, he did show a lot of huge games, like his ceiling. He showed that in a lot of games, right? Like what he can be. He had 5 games where he scored at least 22 fantasy points. To compare that to CJ Stroud's rookie season, he only had 2 such games, right? There have been just 8 rookie quarterbacks to ever have at least 5 games of 22 plus fantasy points in their entire rookie season all time. Those quarterbacks are Caleb Williams, Jaden Daniels, Justin Herbert, Kyler Murray, Dak Prescott, Russell Wilson, RG3, and Cam Newton. That's a really good list. And now I know the rest of his games are really, really bad, right, for fantasy, but they changed the head coach. They changed the play caller. Like things will get better for Caleb Williams in terms of coaching for sure. And we see the upside and we see the rushing. So I really like Caleb Williams this year to just completely break out. And I think he offers us that overall one quarterback potential that you're looking for.
Yeah, I do like him quite a bit. I think those are my two entry points. I mean, Justin Herbert in the middle of the quarterback runs there once the bigger names are off the board. When we say bigger names, it's basically Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, Jalen Hurts, and Jaden Daniels, and maybe Joe Burrow. Like, so once those guys are off the board, I will think about entering the fray for drafting a quarterback if Herbert is still on the board. I'll try to wait it out if people are taking like Jared Goff or Baker Mayfield ahead, and hopefully Herbert falls. But if not, yeah, you go right down to Caleb Williams. Again, everything lines up. We're looking at the scheme. We're looking at the personnel that's going to get an upgrade from the scheme. We thought he had a chance last year because of the upgrades in personnel. But I think now he's got the personnel and the scheme. Hopefully he'll get some offensive line help as well to keep him upright to produce. But he's just too big of a talent to not do well in fantasy, I think. So I think he's going to produce, and he's going to be just fine. And I do have a guy that could really help him produce here with Ben Johnson in 2025.
Yeah, this is a good segue here to your tight end, your top tight end among our top 10 that we chose that you will be targeting this year. He is a weapon for Caleb Williams.
Yeah, Cole Kmet, I look at him, and again, he should have a much bigger influence on this offense. I mean, the fact that they forgot about him was just really bad last year, but you had Shane Waldron, who had Noah Fant in Seattle and didn't know what to do with him. Then we went to Thomas Brown, and it was just absolute mess with the play calling for the Bears last year. They just didn't involve the right people at the right times. It was very inconsistent across the board for their usage of their receivers in general. So now you get someone who's going to probably streamline where the targets go. Kmet is a very athletic guy that can go into the red zone and finish. We've seen that before with Justin Fields scoring quite a bit. And you have Ben Johnson, who knows how to use the tight end scheme open. It wasn't just Sam LaPorta. All those other random Lions tight ends also benefited a lot in the red zone with Ben Johnson. So I think Ben Johnson effect in full swing here with Williams and Kmet. Again, we talked about Keenan Allen possibly leaving. That would open things up again for Kmet as the key target in the middle of the field. So I love it. Ben Johnson, I think, really helps Kmet this year. And look, if you can't go there, I think you go with the tight end that Ben Johnson left behind.
Yeah, exactly. And that's my pick here. So I guess these are all just connecting. But Sam LaPorta, he went really high last year in drafts. I think he's going to drop significantly after a disappointing second season. But I brought this up while we're going through our tight end rankings that it was just the first half of the year that was disappointing. The second half was exactly what he did as a rookie. The second half of the year in weeks 10 through 18, averaged 11.5 fantasy points per game in half PPR and 7.1 targets per game. Those were the exact same numbers up to the decimal that he averaged throughout his rookie season. So he got right back to life. He has scored 17 receiving touchdowns in his career, 10 as a rookie, 7 his second season. Only Rob Gronkowski had more receiving touchdowns among tight ends in NFL history over their first two career NFL seasons. Only George Kittle, Gronk, and Jimmy Graham had more receiving yards than LaPorta among tight ends in NFL history over the first two seasons. What he's done is truly impressive. And we saw the targets, like overall targets on the year. Again, nearly 40 targets less this year, but it's because of how little he was used in the first half of the year. So I expect those targets to go back up to the 120 range that he was at as a rookie, and he gets targeted in the red zone all the time. So I don't think the touchdowns are streaky. I think he gets them because he's utilized in that area and he's big and he's good at catching touchdowns, right? So I fully expect him to come down with 8 to 10 every year, 7 to 10, I should say. But yeah, I'm targeting Sam LaPorta this year just because I think he'll be a great value.
Yeah, and how we looked at it here is Cole Kmet can be had near the bottom of the top 10 or maybe even later. I think his stock will rise, where I think LaPorta is maybe going to settle in the middle there, 4, 5, 6, somewhere there at tight end. So you got to pay a little bit more to get LaPorta. If you can't get him, I think you wait for Kmet. So yeah, we're giving you options here. You can go early or late and find these values in the top 10. Just don't have to force yourself or need necessarily that really high pick to succeed. Now, it's nice, and we'll talk about some guys that you might need to get at a higher pick when you're looking at targeting running backs and wide receivers. We'll do that in our final segment. Then we'll pick our consolation prizes there at those positions as well, just because, again, we may not get who we want, but we always have to have a backup plan. This episode, Locked On Fantasy Football, is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. When the game tips off, the NBA action is just getting started. There's no better place to get in it on than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. And it's exciting against second half of the NBA season as we go toward the playoffs. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout games. So even if you miss the opening tip-offs or want to bet on a fourth quarter comeback in any game, you can stay in the action. If you're looking for a bigger payout, you can combine your live bets into a same game parlay. That's always great to do. Get some extra chances to win. And you got to love using FanDuel's live betting feature because it keeps every moment of the game exciting for you. Whether you're backing your team for a late game rally or picking a player to hit a clutch tree, you never feel like you missed your chance. Plus, the app is easy to use, and when you win, you get paid instantly at FanDuel. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets. If your first $5 bet wins, just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. All right, Michelle, let's continue the show. Well, let's look at our favorite picks from our top 10 early for running backs. You have a guy that's a strong rebound candidate. Now, I personally had him outside the top 10. I was worried about the injuries. But, again, you're going right back to Christian McCaffrey next year.
I am, and it's because you don't have to take him 101, right? I think he's going to fall in the late first round, maybe right at that turn. So, honestly, the two guys I'm choosing are running back and wide receiver. I kind of want the later round pick here in the first round because I could possibly get both at the turn. But it's Christian McCaffrey at running back that I'll be targeting because of, we see it, right? We've seen how much evidence that he can be the top running back in any given year. He's a running back 1 in 2023, running back 2 in 2022, running back 8 in 2021, running back 1 in 2020, running back 1 in 2019. He's consistently good when he's healthy. And that's always been his issue. The only years that he's been bad for fantasy is the health. And it typically ends up being missed seasons, right? It's not just a couple games. It's full seasons that are okay. And Christian McCaffrey didn't help you at all. But if he can stay healthy next year, he's going to be great. And he's going to go late first round probably. But he only played 2 full games with Brock Purdy this year. That's it. And in those games, he had 19 and 23 touches. Now, he didn't score a touchdown in either of those games, but that's never been an issue for Christian McCaffrey scoring touchdowns. Those will come. But he's going to get 20-plus touches a game as long as he's healthy. I'm going to take the bet on that late in the first round.
Yeah, he's a good rebound candidate for sure, and anyone who's finished at the top of fantasy scoring is a great target because they can always get back to level, and we've seen it happen already once with McCaffrey. So he's a pretty resilient guy. He knows that he doesn't have too much time left maybe to be this top-level running back. The 49ers need him. He'll be totally working hard to get back to full speed. So I think McCaffrey will do anything he can to get there, and we'll know. We'll have a good clarity on where he stands with his injury rehab and if he's all fully healthy. Hopefully we won't have that surprise from last year. And if that's the case, then you're going to be in business again with CMC. Now, Jonathan Taylor also was notably a top fantasy running back scorer just a few years ago from scrimmage and with just rushing yardage and touchdowns. He's capable of taking over. So I love Jonathan Taylor. I loved him last year. The touchdowns really disappointed. He had that stretch of injuries where I think he would have really gotten going, but then they had to work in those other backs that were all over the place with Trey Sermon and Tyler Goodson and all these guys that just weren't the same, right? To get those touches, you just didn't get the value recreated with those backups. So Jonathan Taylor, again, he missed that stretch. He came back, scored quite a bit in the second half of the season. So, again, he was a little bit more in sync with what they want to do offensively. It didn't help that he had a quarterback transition in the middle as well from Anthony Richardson and Joe Flacco. I think they need to get Jonathan Taylor going. I think the offensive line is pretty good in Indianapolis. We'll see what they do with some decisions up front. But, again, Shane Steichen should get more out of the running game this year in Indianapolis. So, again, Jonathan Taylor playing off Richardson, that can be a dangerous combo. I thought you might have some of the Derrick Henry effect with Lamar Jackson. That didn't happen, but I think it more materializes here with Taylor going in the middle of RB1s and being a good value, better than usual.
Yeah, he's consistently pretty much a good value because I do think he maybe doesn't offer the upside of like a Christian McCaffrey or some other guys that we talked about in our running back rankings because of the receiving, like to be that. He has already been an overall one running back, right? But it wasn't that insanely huge year that you can get out of some running back one performances. But his touchdowns are safe. His workload is safe. He's a great running back. And if it all comes together, like, yeah, he's going to have a great year. He was in consideration here for me, but I went with the upside of Christian McCaffrey just with his receiving, right? The one thing that Jonathan Taylor's kind of lacking. Moving to wide receiver, I need this guy on my team this year. That's it. It's Malik Nabers. And if I can get him at the turn with Malik Nabers and Christian McCaffrey, I'd be so happy with that start. Wide receiver 7 in total points as a rookie, wide receiver 8 in points per game. He caught 7 of the Giants' 15 passing touchdowns this year. He's just, this offense was so incredibly bad, and he still was a top 8 fantasy wide receiver. Like, that's crazy to me. The only wide receivers to average more points per game than Nabers as a rookie since 1990 were Odell Beckham Jr., Randy Moss, and Jamar Chase. Malik Nabers was at 14.6 fantasy points per game this year. So that was even more than Brian Tnomas Jr. at 14.1. Even the guys after Malik Nabers that averaged just under him: Anquan Bolden, Puka Nacua, Justin Jefferson, Brian Thomas Jr., Mike Evans, Michael Thomas, and Julio Jones, and Marcus Colston. Those are top 12. I mean, there's not a bad name in that list, right? So especially that fourth most behind only OBJ, Randy Moss, and Jamar Chase is just crazy to me. And he did that with Daniel Jones and Drew Lock, and like just bad quarterbacks, 170 targets. This man showed that he can just be peppered with targets and get it done no matter who the quarterback is. I think he has true wide receiver 1 overall potential. And as long as they get him a mediocre quarterback, I think he can get there.
Yeah, and I wish they had actually stuck with Daniel Jones, because I think that would have helped Nabers in the end have bigger numbers, because Daniel Jones was having one thing working. He was targeting Nabers was being targeted by Jones so much, right, early. And he was just eating up catches because he was just the only guy. He was the only thing that you could really get going in this offense. The running game was still kind of sputtering, trying to figure out Devin Singletary and Tyrone Tracy Jr. They didn't have a lot in the wide receiver core, so it was a lot of Nabers early. And again, Nabers kind of tapered off a little bit, but then had that spike at the end where he was toggling with Brock Bowers with the receptions, right? So he was right up there. I do love Nabers quite a bit. The quarterback situation, if it's something decent, right? If they get a Sam Darnold, say, in free agency, then you know he's going to target Nabers a lot, and that's great, right? If you can just get a quarterback that is going to just keep it simple and get it to Nabers a lot, and basically do what Jones was doing early in the season, but at a more effective and efficient rate. Now, I have Puka Nacua. Like, there's going to be a lot of buzz over Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson, but Puka Nacua could be right up there with them. Keep in mind that he's also a guy that played well immediately, right? Jefferson and Chase had big rookie years, and they've kept up the momentum. Now Nacua is going to operate probably without Cooper Kupp. I think he's going to dominate targets here. I think right now we would assume that Matthew Stafford remains the starting quarterback with the Rams. If that's the case, Nacua is going to be just deployed everywhere and have some big games. And keep in mind, we've seen a lot of Nacua without Kupp on the field, and it's been spectacular. When he gets those opportunities and everyone else just kind of fills in the gaps behind him with the targets and receptions, he can absolutely go off. So this is really tied to Nacua staying healthy, Kupp not being in Los Angeles, and then just going off. So he's another guy that I think we'll see the touchdowns pop up a little bit. Another receiver like Nabers, I think, that has a chance to finish as a wide receiver 1 overall.
He definitely has that potential. I mean, I think the only thing that was holding him back this year was just the injuries. And besides that, as long as he has Matthew Stafford, he'll be a question mark if they lose Matthew Stafford, right? Because you need to know who your quarterback is, and we've never seen him with anyone else but Stafford in his 2 years, obviously. But Nacua is a special talent, and he definitely does have that ability. He was also a consideration of mine as well. But we're going to get into our consolation prizes at running back and wide receiver. If we miss out on our Christian McCaffrey or Jonathan Taylor, Malik Nabers, or Puka Nacua, who are we going to turn to, and who's a guy that we still really much want on our roster if we can't get our top option? We'll get to that right after a quick break. All right, so you miss out on Jonathan Taylor, Vinny. Let's just do this hypothetical situation here for you in your drafts. Who are you turning to at running back if you don't get Jonathan Taylor?
Yeah, we'll talk about him again. He's worth to bring up is Ashton Genty. We had him at the bottom of our top 10. I just know that rookie running backs that have special talent and land in pretty good situations, and I expect him to. Like if it's Dallas, we're in business. Like Rico Dowdle was still manageable and usable at times last year. And I think Genty has way more talent than Rico Dowdle. He goes there, we're good. The Raiders, even with their mix of dudes, right? Alexander Madison and Amir Abdullah and all the guys they trotted out there, they were viable from time to time. These are just lower level running backs, right? Then you have a place like the Steelers, right? Where if they let Najee Harris walk and they're just tired of telegraphing things with who's on the field with Harris or Jalen Warren, they might go in this direction. The Broncos, a budding offense, could look at Ashton Genty, go from the Boise State Broncos to the Denver Broncos. So all the team scenarios, the Chargers, you can't forget about them either. All the team scenarios look really good for Ashton Genty, and the talent is really there. Now, I think you have another capable back of being a big asset in fantasy, Omarion Hampton out of North Carolina. You'd be for those teams that didn't get the services of Genty. But I think wherever he goes, he's going to go to a place where he's going to see immediate big touches, have a chance to carry that backfield, and he's going to be a volume and talent king here with his production right away. I think he steps in. He's already a very talented running back in relation to the veterans of the league. So I'm excited for Genty, and we'll be more excited once we have a NFL team that's drafting him.
Yeah, I'm going to be very excited for Ashton Genty as long as he lands on a team that we can feel comfortable that he'll get a lot of touches and that it's not like a disastrous team. We're going to like him a lot. Now, my consolation prize isn't really even a consolation prize. I like if I have to decide between these two in my draft, I'm going to have a hard time doing it. And it's Devin Achane. The reason I went with Christian McCaffrey is because with Achane, we have to depend on Tua Tagovailoa staying healthy, right? And the 2 of the last 3 seasons, that has not happened. So with that, that's the worry with Achane, and that's the only worry, is that Tua needs to stay healthy. But as a rookie, he finished as running back 4 in points per game. Second season, he falls down a little bit, running back 11 fantasy points per game. But the only reason he was running back 11 is because of the 6 games that Tua missed this year. Because in the 11 games that Tua started in 2024 season, Achane averaged 19.5 fantasy points per game in half PPR. He averaged 105 scrimmage yards per game and a full touchdown per game, nearly 7 targets per game in the 11 games that Tua started. 19.5 fantasy points per game would have ranked him 3rd this season behind only Saquon Barkley and right next to Jahmyr Gibbs, who was at 19.8. There was only 2 games that Tua started this year that he scored even under 16 fantasy points, and one was 11.1. Other was one bad game at 7.7. Like, as long as Tua is healthy, Achane is a beast. But that's just the only worry. Can Tua stay healthy?
Yeah, that's very fair. I mean, it's a good consolation prize because Achane is just that healthy. We know Raheem Mostert is not part of this mix anymore. They want to give Achane a chance to be that feature role type back, and he's very versatile. We saw last year that really helped his production. So I really like it. You're kind of getting a McCaffrey younger, lighter version in a similar offense. You could look at it that way a little bit later, and some people are going to be down on Achane just being aware of the Dolphins' struggles last year, but it wasn't really anything to do with him. He kept producing and worked out of this offense out of necessity. So I'm excited about your Achane pick. Now, for our wide receiver consolation prize, I think I know why we both put this player, because we wanted to shoot a little bit for the moon and some other guys at this position, go a little bit higher. We want to be careful where we draft this guy, but it's Brian Tnomas Jr. We love him. There's no doubt about it. Now, I would even say if you have a Malik Nabers, a Brian Tnomas Jr., some kind of combination at wide receiver, you're going to be sitting pretty. Maybe add Marvin Harrison in the rebound and have just the 3 rookies from last year all play. But Brian Tnomas Jr. is just too good. I think he's going to be really good in this Liam Cohen offense. And this guy we're both going to sign off here as a guy you definitely want to target if you're not getting a wide receiver in the top 3.
Yeah, I brought up the Malik Nabers stats, right? And Brian Tnomas Jr. was mentioned in that list of the top 12 guys. He was at number 8 with only OBJ, Randy Moss, Chase, Nabers, Anquan Boldin, Puka Nacua, and Justin Jefferson scoring more fantasy points per game than Brian Tnomas Jr. as a rookie in NFL history. So like he's right up there with these guys. The biggest question mark is the change at play caller, at head coach, right? But you would think that would get better. The change at quarterback, because a lot of his great games were with Mac Jones, weirdly enough. But you would think with Trevor Lawrence that should be better. And then who do they add at receiver? I don't know if that really matters. Like, I think the biggest thing with Brian Tnomas Jr. coming out of school was, is he just a big play guy, or can he be utilized as a possession receiver? Like, get those 8 to 10 targets a game. Can he be good in that role? I think he very much proved he could be great in that role, especially towards the end of the year when they needed him. They gave him 10 plus targets a game. He averaged 19 fantasy points per game from weeks 13 through 18 in that last 6 weeks. He proved that he can be great in that role. In the game, he had 9 games with at least 8 targets in a rookie season, averaged 18 fantasy points per game. Like, when he gets the targets, he proves that he can be a true alpha wide receiver one. It's just, will they pepper him with those targets? And I think they will. So I really like Brian Tnomas Jr. this year, and I would be happy to have him if I miss out on Malik Nabers.
Yeah, we talked about, okay, maybe you go for the second year wide receivers. Now, just you cannot go wrong if you just think, I need an LC wide receiver. I need 1 or 2. So you have Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, Malik Nabers, Brian Tnomas Jr. They just keep producing these dudes that are playing at a high level. So if I could get a combo of those and walk away, I don't think it can happen, potentially with the positional runs, right? If you're able to get one of these guys early, come back there in the late second round, when you come back from the turn and get the other, you're really sitting well at this position. So I really like these receivers. I think there's something innate in them, right? We thought Jamar Chase was a complete package. There was no doubt about it. Justin Jefferson, was he only a slot receiver? No. He can also be a big play receiver. Now, I think we're seeing the opposite of Brian Tnomas Jr. Is he just a big play receiver? No, he's a complete receiver as well. Malik Nabers came in being able to do everything that Chase can. So these are the 4 guys I would just want to have. I'd want one of them on my team. So let's just say that if I'm not picking in position to get Chase or Jefferson, if I get Nabers and or Thomas, I'd be just thrilled. So again, what a system of wide receivers, and it's all pointing upward based on the changes here for Nabers and Thomas and what they'll get help with to put up their fantasy points in 2025.
Yeah, I think this little exercise here has definitely opened my eyes that I want to later pick in the first round. I want to be close to that turn for sure. Maybe things will change in the next, we got like 6 more months before the season starts. But for now, sitting in February, that's where my brain is at. That is it for today's episode. I want to thank you all for making Locked On Fantasy Football your first listen every day. If you're watching us on YouTube, hit that subscribe button. If you're listening to us on whatever podcast app you use, leave us a review, give us that 5 stars, please. You'll help us grow so we can be here for you every day, helping you win your fantasy football leagues. We'll be back on Monday. We'll talk to you then. Bye, y'all.